Hi everyone, and welcome again to Action! Bible! Summer! You want to do it with us? Action! Bible! Summer! So if you remember, we are talking about what the Bible teaches us about worship. And last time we learned that there's one necessary thing. Do you remember in one word what the one necessary thing is to not forget amongst all the other things? It's worship, worshiping God. And today we're going to look more at worshiping God. And we're going to look at a story from the Bible. And I will read it for us. It's in Genesis chapter 4. It's the story of Cain and Abel. And we're going to focus on the beginning part. Now Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. So we have two different, very different sacrifices here, right? We have the sacrifice of Abel, which you have to put on your imagination hat. This is really venison, but we're going to pretend that it is a newly slaughtered lamb, firstborn of the flock. And we have the sacrifice of Cain, which might have been like this, or it might have been some type of a grain offering. So we have some type of a grain offering and a animal offering. Now, why did God accept one and not the other? That was something that, as a kid, I was a little bit confused by. As a kid, my Sunday school looked a little different maybe than yours, because I grew up in Bolivia, and our church was a adobe dirt floor building, and the kids were sent outside for Sunday school, and then we came back in to do our song or our Bible verse, which might be similar to you. Maybe you do that as well. But I grew up in church, and this verse and this story confused me. Why was Abel's sacrifice acceptable to God, whereas Cain's wasn't? It's not that God likes animal better than vegetable or better than grain. So the rest of the Bible, if we look into the rest of the Bible and we look at this story more closely, we get some clues. So let's look for those clues in the Bible. And one of those clues that we find in the New Testament in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 11:4 tells us that by faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, and it was commended to him as righteousness. So Abel's sacrifice was made in faith, and Cain's wasn't. So that can tell us that faith is a part of worship. And really, without what Jesus Christ did for us on the cross, we wouldn't be able to worship at all. We wouldn't be able to pray. So we worship God with our faith because He's the one who's opened up a door for us to come to Him. So the first thing is faith. What about a second thing, a second difference? Well, as you guys can look at this story in your Action Bibles, it's on page 24 and 25. And here we'll see a second difference. You can see the picture of Abel worshiping God, and then Cain, when his sacrifice wasn't accepted, the Bible tells us that his face fell and that he became very angry. And you can see that on his face here, what the Bible tells us happened. So the anger that was already in his heart, he had a heart of anger when he came with his sacrifice, and the anger that was already in his heart was revealed. There was also jealousy, and his whole face fell with so many bad emotions. So there were these bad emotions in his heart, and he was coming to God with that type of heart. Whereas Abel came to God with a heart of worship. And that shows us the second thing about worship, that it's about the heart. We could be doing everything that looks like worship. We could be raising our hands, closing our eyes, playing instruments, singing. We could be doing all kinds of things that look like worship. But if our heart's not in the right place, Jesus says that it's in vain. So Jesus said it this way. He was quoting the prophet Isaiah when he said, "This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me." So that's another really important thing about worship, is that we do it with our hearts. And then a third difference between Cain and Abel's sacrifice is their entire lives. 1 John 3:12 tells us more about Cain and Abel. And it tells us that Cain was known for wicked deeds. So later in the story, when he kills his brother, that's just another of one of the extreme of the wicked things that he was already doing. He was known for wicked deeds. And Abel was known for doing good things. So we worship God with our entire lives. We either worship God with everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we think, everything you can possibly think of, or we don't worship him very well at all. So we worship God with our entire lives, with everything. So Genesis 4:7, that last verse I read, I'll read it to you again. It's God saying to Cain, "If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you. You must rule over it." Do any of us do well all the time? No, right? We all mess up. Do any of us rule over our sin? Ruling over our sin would mean that we would never sin, because we would have complete control over it. And we know that we don't do that. We don't rule over our sin and never sin. We are sinful, and God is holy. So how can we come to God and worship him? Ultimately, there's only one offering of worship, one sacrifice of worship that is acceptable to God. And that is when God sent his son Jesus, who died on the cross for our sins. Worship itself, just by itself, cannot bring us into God's presence. Only Jesus can do that. So because of what Jesus has done, we can worship God. Let's remember those things. We can worship God with our faith in Jesus Christ. We can worship God with our hearts. It's not about external behaviors. It's about what's in our hearts. And we can worship God with everything, with our entire lives. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye for now till the next video.